Hello, Michael Tracy here, TYT. I just have a question. Hopefully, you'll help me out with this. I have a question for the journalists and the media outlets and the pundits who have spent the past, I don't know, 8 months denigrating WikiLeaks, snickering every time it was mentioned, questioning the authenticity of its publications, claiming that it wasn't a legitimate journalism or publishing outfit. I just want to ask them, why is it that WikiLeaks always seems to be successfully imposing transparency on the country's most powerful factions? Meanwhile, the US media seems to lag seriously behind. So to me, the media who constantly attack WikiLeaks don't really have a leg to stand on, seeing as it's WikiLeaks which is providing the American people vital information as to the workings of its government. And we just saw that evidence yet again today with the publication of these extremely revelatory CIA documents. So why didn't CNN get a hold of these documents? Why didn't, I don't know, MSNBC, break some news here with information about how the CIA could hack into your smartphone or your TV device? I don't know. Maybe they are missing some kind of journalistic muscle there that WikiLeaks always seems to be exercising. You tell me. Either way, the moral preening that you constantly see with mainstream journalists who try to depict WikiLeaks in the worst possible light seems entirely misplaced when you consider that WikiLeaks has an unblemished track record of accurate publications, and publications which have made a huge impact worldwide for years now. So recall, the publication of the DNC emails in July of 2016 resulted in the resignation of the entire DNC leadership structure because their wrongdoing was exposed. We know about the manipulation of the Democratic primary process and the victimization of Bernie Sanders purely as a result of WikiLeaks. We got the speech transcripts that Hillary Clinton claimed that she was pondering releasing, but never did, purely as a result of WikiLeaks. Remember, she said she would look into releasing the transcripts of her speeches to Goldman Sachs and other hated Wall Street banks, but they never came out. The only reason they came out was because of WikiLeaks. And now, the only reason that we have verifiable documentation of the CIA's engaging in, extreme spying tactics and tactics which could be feasibly used on American citizens, it's because of WikiLeaks. So when I see these pundits kind of just snidely dismissing WikiLeaks and calling it nothing more than a pawn of the Kremlin, my question is just so weird. What's your journalistic track record? Why haven't you done anything that even remotely compares to WikiLeaks in terms of the significance of your work output? It's just not even comparable. And another question I have is for Nancy Pelosi. You may remember Nancy Pelosi. She was previously Speaker of the House. She continues to be the House Minority Leader. So here's what Nancy Pelosi said on March 5th, this past weekend. She said, quote, "I think the press were accomplices in the undermining of our election." Now, what is the basis of her claim there? She is saying that because the press reported on documents that were released by WikiLeaks, meaning the John Podesta emails, the DNC emails, because the press reported on those, which were plainly in the public interest, and it would have been a dereliction of duty for the press to not have reported on those materials, Nancy Pelosi claims that the press were effectively accomplices of a foreign subversion plot because they dared to report on those materials. So my question for Nancy Pelosi is, okay, so now that WikiLeaks, who you've dismissed as just this pawn of a foreign regime, now that they've given the American people just more crucial information about the workings of their government, Is anybody who reports on these CIA documents also an accomplice in the undermining of American democracy? Is that really, the hill you want to die on? Because that's an incredibly stifling thing. If a journalist says, very conceivably, I could be accused of being party to this foreign conspiracy plot if I merely report on these documents, that journalist might reckon that it's not necessarily in his or her interest to do so. So for all the consternation over Trump's attacks on the media, and he's done plenty, and they're always very crude and foolish, Pelosi did something that warrants serious attention in its own right, because she's saying that anybody who reports on WikiLeaks materials is essentially a pawn in Putin's game. So it's ridiculous. And then my third question is for the New York Times, my favorite organ of conventional wisdom. The New York Times, you may recall, reported in December of last year. It released a story that was supposed to be this, the definitive TikTok about how WikiLeaks released those emails that reflected on Hillary Clinton, how the intelligence community in the U.S. responded. And here's what the New York Times wrote in December. And as always, all the relevant links are in the description box, so don't take my word for it. Always consult the original sources. Here's what WikiLeaks said. Here's what the New York Times said in that December piece. Though Mr. Assange did not say so, WikiLeaks' best defense may be the conduct of the mainstream American media. Every major publication, including the Times, published multiple stories citing the DNC and Podesta emails posted by WikiLeaks, becoming a de facto instrument of Russian intelligence. Okay, so the thousands of journalists who reported on those emails, including, by their own admission, the New York Times, in retrospect, should be cast as instruments of Russian intelligence, really? So if we grant that the New York Times wasn't kidding there, which I hope they were, but they really, I tend to doubt it. If we take that as face value, that claim, then presumably anybody who reports on these incredibly consequential CIA revelations should also be considered an instrument of Russian intelligence, because WikiLeaks, we're supposed to believe, is nothing more than an extension of the Russian intelligence apparatus. How destructive is that? How insidious is that? How stifling of the free flow of information is that kind of mindset? But you see it repeated over and over again, constantly by liberal media outlets, mainstream media outlets, and even some conservative media outlets. So it really is rather insane. And what this all does in totality is it promotes a sort of paranoid view that's increasingly been adopted among facets of the populace, which ordinarily perceive themselves to be averse to conspiratorial thinking. There's always some kind of underhanded explanation for things that happen. There could be infiltration by the Russians at every turn. There's a Putin spy behind every bush, and it leads to this sort of confirmation bias effect, where people think that they're these amateur sleuths, and they're constantly connecting the dots, and the timing of this seems suspicious, and the timing of that seems intended to deflect criticism from Trump, and you need to hold a chalkboard with a Glenn Beck style flowchart to explain it all. And there was a really great piece from Masha Gessen in the New York Review of Books that I also linked to here, and I want to just and I want to quote from it briefly, because this is the mindset that she describes here is the mindset which is deflecting attention away today from the severity of these CIA revelations. People think that it's just part of this grand scheme devised by Putin, and they're not as willing to just examine the materials on their own terms. So here's what Gessen writes, quote, "The dream fueling the Russia frenzy is that it will continue to create a dark enough cloud of suspicion around Trump that Congress will find the will and the grounds to impeach him. If that happens, it will have resulted largely from a media campaign orchestrated by members of the intelligence community, setting a dangerous political precedent that will have corrupted the public sphere and promoted paranoia. That is the best case outcome. More likely, the Russia allegations will not bring down Trump. She then goes on later to say, Russiagate is helping Trump, both by distracting from real, documentable, and documented issues, and by promoting a xenophobic conspiracy theory in the cause of removing a xenophobic conspiracy theorist from office. Now, I know liberals love to think of themselves as totally above xenophobia, and they could never fall victim to it, and they loathe it, but undergirding this Russia mania is a fundamentally xenophobic impulse. It's Russophobia, so maybe we're okay with demonizing Russians without sufficient grounds, but that still is xenophobia, and that xenophobia, which has been fomented by Democrats and liberals, is contributing to this attitude where we don't need to even take this latest round of revelations seriously because, in some sense, it might have its origins with Russia, Russian intelligence, or something. So I would say resist that impulse. Look carefully at these revelations. Try to be rational about things, as always, and that will do it for now. Let me know what you think. Contact me on Twitter. Sometimes the YouTube comments, as I'm sure everyone knows, can devolve into just utter derangement. So while I do glance at them, if you actually have something substantive to say, better to get in contact with me over Twitter or email or something along those lines. Okay, see you later.